Do you like to gamble with antennas? Let's take a look at an end-fed random wire, specifically the X-Tenna version of one. Let's see what its pros and cons are and how it compares to an end-fed half-wave antenna. Next on AA3K On The Go. Recently, I've been somewhat intrigued by the concept of the end-fed random wire antenna. Setup-wise, they're very similar to an end-fed half-wave, which is really taking the portable operations world by storm. But there are several key differences in an end-fed random wire as compared to an end-fed half-wave. The one big difference is the end-fed random wire is not resonant on any amateur radio band, where an end-fed half-wave is resonant on the lowest frequency of operation that you cut the wire for, which practically is 40 meters, about 65 feet of wire, and on all the harmonically related bands above it. End-fed random wires are specifically cut so they are not resonant on any amateur radio frequency. So you do have to use an antenna matching unit in order to make this antenna work with your radio. So looking around, I decided to purchase a X-Tenna kit off of Etsy. Now, I purchased this with my own money. This is not a sponsored, this was not given to me. So we're going to go through the contents of the kit, some things I noticed about what was included and not included in this kit. I'm going to be putting it together. I won't bore you with those individual steps of putting it together, but I will show you the finished results. And then we're going to get this set up and run some whisper tests, at least on 10, 15, 20, and 40 for comparison to my end-fed half-wave, and this antenna's performance on the walk bands, 12 meters, 17 meters, and 30 meters, which is something you can't achieve with a end-fed half-wave cut for 40 meters. All right, let's take a look at what comes with a X-Tenna. Now, this basic kit is put together either with a 9-to-1 transformer, which is this part here, for an end-fed random wave, or a 49-to-1 transformer for an end-fed half-wave. In the end result, it's just the winding on the toroid, which is hidden underneath that heat shrink tubing there. So let's take out the contents and see what we get here. We have on a nice wire winder just over 70 feet, about 21.5 meters of, this looks to be about 22 gauge wire. The insulation on here is a little bit on the stiff side, and we're going to be using 58 feet as the radiating element and the remaining leftover part as a counterpoise. Though the shield portion of the BNC here is connected to the ground lug, so your coax shield could be your counterpoise also. Here we have the actual transformer assembly, and hopefully get a little peek inside there. So it's just the wires wrapped around a toroid. It has a BNC. Now, most of my coax, except for one piece, which I have not yet used in the field, is all PL259, so I'll need to use an adapter on that. The antenna connects there, your counterpoise connects there, and there's also pads for ground and the antenna here if you have some other change you want to do. Now you can strain relief the wire through here or loop it around and use a little mini S carabiner that comes with this and clip the wire through here. And I'm going to be showing some close-ups of the instruction steps, but there are no extremely detailed steps of assembling that, just very brief notes here. And one part, and you'll see it more closely in the inset, is that it appears that he used a piece of maybe 2 inches, 4 or 5 centimeters of small heat shrink tubing and a wire tie to put it where the feed comes out of the toroid and then goes off to the antenna, clipped through here and then clipped onto the transformer assembly to hold those two together so this wire going out to the antenna wouldn't pull through and put all the stress on the terminal lug there. Now, he did not include that longer piece of heat shrink tubing or that wire tie, but fortunately, I do have a stock, particularly of 1/8 inch, shrinking down to 1/16 inch heat shrink tubing, and some pretty small wire ties, which have a maximum bundle of 0.81 inches or 20.5 millimeters. So I should be able to shrink that down, give enough of a friction fit there that that will not be a problem. Then there are as you can see, I've already put a wire tie ready for assembly, and this piece of heat shrink tubing there. And one other thing, he does give you some heat shrink tubing to put where the wire goes into these terminals, but it's pretty short, so I'm going to be using a longer section of this tubing. Sorry if I went out of frame there. Just to give more strain release, particularly if it's flexing. If you do a pull like that on the wire in the terminal, the wire itself will break, but more likely it's just going to be flexing. So having the extra heat shrink tubing there will give it a little bit more strain relief towards flexing. You have 2 sets of nuts and thumb screws that would go through the antenna point there and the ground point there, so you could attach your counterpoise in your antenna, as well as this piece of plastic with 3 holes in it where you can take your far end, as everything goes running across the table, where you can take your far end and loop it through those 3 holes, give it friction, and you can adjust the length of the antenna to make sure it is not resonant on any particular band. And that's the one key thing. In some ways, the end-fed half wave is a little bit more difficult to get working, because if it is resonant on any of the bands that you want to use it on, even on harmonics, in many cases, many multiples out, you're going to find the antenna is not going to want to get you a good match, even with an antenna matching unit on those frequencies. So through experimentation and notes of other hams, and I'll list this in the description as well as at the bottom of the screen here, they've determined certain particular lengths work best in giving you the maximum utilization on the amateur radio bands. So let me get to actually putting this thing together. I'm not going to do that on camera, and then we'll set it up in the backyard as I've set up other antennas for testing and other half-wave antennas, and run some tests. And one thing I did not mention is that KC8YBC, the owner of X-Tennas, did include this handy-dandy band chart sticker in the kit. Haven't decided where I'm going to put it, but it may well make it onto a clipboard I carry or something else. We shall see. All right, so I've got the antenna end connected. I just need to measure it out, and I have a long tape measure, and we'll do so in the backyard, and the remaining wire will become a counterpoise. But as the instructions showed, I just crimped and soldered the eyelet onto the end of the wire after stripping it. Then I used a longer length of heat shield just to make sure that there is more strain relief on the wire, as the insulation in the wire did shrink a little bit when I was doing the soldering. Now, when I put it together, I did put the flat end of the bottom thumb screw against the PC board just to spread the load there. And he recommends that you put the eyelet on the top side of the board in contact with that pad there. Looped it around. I used that longer length of heat shrink tubing. I also used his shorter length of heat shrink tubing that I put underneath the zip tie, and I clamped things down, and that should hold against normal strain and stress. And one advantage of doing it this way is you can take it off and substitute, say, a longer wire like 71, 72 feet. That should be much more efficient for radiating on 80 meters, something which doesn't get a lot of use in at least parks on the air. But hey, giving myself such an antenna and a chance to use it would be a good thing. Now, one thing he does note, and it's nice that he puts it right here on the circuit board of the transformer: 100 watts SSB, 40 watts CW, and digital. At higher continuous, or I should say higher duty cycles, with higher power, the transformer will heat up. I was doing a Parks on the Air demonstration with my local radio club a year or so ago, and it was right after a coronal mass ejection. The bands were horrible. It took about 4.5 hours to get 11 contacts, And when we finally took everything down, I did notice the transformer box for my 1010's end-fed half wave was on the warm side, and that was because I was calling a lot of CQ at 100 watts. All right, let me get this stretched out in the backyard, get the 58 or so feet. Actually, I'm going to probably make it like 59 or 60 feet, measured from here, and then do the fold back using this, and have it set up and ready to rumble. So what I did is I just put a landscaping spike through the end of a 100-foot tape measure that I have, which has imperial and metric measurements on the other side. So total length of the tape measure is about 30 meters. And through the S-spinner at the transformer end, and rolled the tape measure out about 60 feet. And then I unwrapped the wire down to 59 feet and cut it there. So I made the loop at the end of the wire at 58 feet, and then had plenty of wire left over to run through this strain relief at the end, and then wrap it a few times down here. If I have to make the wire longer, I can do so, but if this is successful, I'd like to make a 72 foot one, and I'll use a different wire for that and be able to swap it out. And 72 foot, really for the reason of being able to definitely get 80 meters. Alrighty, once again, we've set up the antenna for testing, just like I've set up my end-fed half waves. The end-fed random wave transformer is here on this fence post stake, and the wire, which you can probably barely see, is going up into the tree over there and hanging off the end of my 33-foot, 10-meter jack kite mast. And at the test and analysis station, I have my good old laptop, my 817, and I also got the LDG Z817, or is it the Z817 automatic antenna tuner for it. Ham Radio Outlet had a sale around Dayton 2025 time, and basically they were blowing them out, probably because the 817 and 818 line are discontinued. A little electronic note tablet, some cheat sheet notes for using the tuner, and we're going to run through all the bands. Now, as it's getting late right now, you can see the sun barely up there above those pine trees. Probably only going to do 2 runs per band on each of the antennas, and I'm going to obviously start out on 10 meters because by the time I get to the end-fed half wave, 10 meters might be pretty well dead, but we shall see. Next, let's take a look at all of the data I collected here. And here are the SWR plots that I did across all of the amateur radio bands. And I was very surprised to see that 15 meters was resonant across the band. And when I ran my performance tests, I took the LGG tuner out of line. In other words, I put it into bypass mode, so the radio was directly connected to the antenna. The very high end of 10 meters is usable without a tuner, but there tends not to be a tremendous amount of 10-meter activity up there. For most amateur radio transceivers with a built-in antenna matching unit, they have a limit of 3 to 1, so 12 meters, and the Parks on the Air money band 40 meters with about 5 to 1 SWR may not, and most likely will not, tune with those antenna matching units. Something I'm going to have to do a little testing with my ICOM IC 7300. Now, I do have an external MFJ 939 tuner, which, if I remember correctly, has a 10 to 1 SWR capability, so I could run that, but that does mean I have to carry an extra piece of equipment, which is one of the reasons I bought the 7300, is that the antenna matching unit was built into it and I did not have to carry that. The LDG 817 tuner also has a 10 to 1 matching ratio, so it had no problems finding a match for these bands or any of the bands that I used it on. I did not run any performance tests on 160 meters just because at 58 feet that wire is definitely too short for any efficiency there. And if you want, you can pause the video and get a closer look at all of the SWR plots. Taking a look at the overall performance, it was after sunset before I got a chance to do the end-fed half wave testing, So performance on 10 and 15 meters did suffer there, almost half as the number of stations that heard me, but the distance reached out was the same. And looking at the signal to noise ratios, especially the standard deviation, which is the spread around the average of all the stations that heard me, a little bit wider spread from weakest to strongest. 15 meters, again, almost dropped half in the number of stations that heard me, but the furthest out station was significantly further, though the overall signal to noise ratio standard deviation was similar. So looking at the performance there, that these two are, these two antennas are relatively close in performance. Looking at 20 and 40 meters, which is not as affected right when the sun goes down. As a matter of fact, 40 meters is becoming alive then. The performance was very close to each other, though a little bit more spread on the standard deviation for signal to noise. Taking a look at the end-fed random wire performance on 12, 17, 30, and 80 meters, where the end-fed half wave is not resonant, we're seeing very good results here. Overall number of stations that heard me, the maximum kilometers out, though, was quite a bit lighter on 80 meters. Very consistent spread of signal to noise ratio standard deviation. So what do I think of the X-Tenna and an end-fed random wire? I think it's going to be a worthy companion to an end-fed half-wave antenna. I was very surprised that it actually tuned up on 15 meters when really it should not have been resonant on any band. I'm going to have to investigate the high SWR not only on 12 meters but particularly 40 meters, which is one of the Parks on the Air money bands for activations. My ICOM 7300, its built-in antenna matching unit or antenna tuning unit if you prefer, is limited to a 3-to-1 SWR, and I'm seeing about a 5-to-1 SWR on this antenna with 58 feet of wire. I intend to investigate to see if I can get the 7300's internal antenna matching unit to tune this and make the 7300 happy, or will I have to go back to using my external MFJ 939 antenna tuner, and this has about a 10-to-1 range. One of the reasons I bought my 7300 is because it had the antenna tuner built into it. You can get a slightly off-resonant antenna usable with the 7300, and I would not need to carry this along with my ICOM 706 that I had been using for portable operations. For the 817, as you see, I have the LDG 817 antenna matching unit, and I also have this MTech ZM2 Z-Match unit, which is a manual tuner. Both of those are QRP only, so trying to use this at 100 watts with this probably wouldn't work out too well. I do want to experiment with the length here. I would like to try a 72-foot wire and see how that performs, and I'm going to be going and adjusting the length of this wire to see if I can bring that mismatch on 12 meters and 40 meters down to something potentially acceptable to the 7300, and see, does that also cause a problem with the 15-meter match? Hey, before you leave, why don't you check out the playlist right over here for other videos that I have done about antennas and portable operation. Take care. Alpha Alpha 3 Kilo, saying 73.